Welcome everybody to a PAiCE training video that looks at an overview of Module A. A in this case stands for Adaptation. Module A is the home of the workshop. We've done a lot of pre-population before to get us to the point where we're ready to run the workshop. And what we're trying to do in Module A is to identify, characterize, consider and prioritize different adaptations to the key challenges that we face. Module A has 12 sub-modules and we'll go through them now. The first of the sub-modules is A-. Now, just as in the previous modules, the minus stands for the setup of the module. So A- is about creating a long list of possible adaptation options. And as you'll see on the right-hand side here, there's a lot of yellow there. Previous versions of PAiCE, you could evaluate up to 10 different adaptations, but in this version that's been updated, you can do up to 40. Of course, we suggest that you wouldn't want to do that because you couldn't get it in one workshop. But we've also done that so that when you get to the end, you can put all of the group's different work together into one file very quickly and compare the results. What I'll do is I will go back and put in some existing data that we have. Now this is just example data. So we'll come back. And so this is what it looks like when it's got a little bit of data in it. But the key components of this module A-, which is the setup, is that it tells us the different characteristics of what PAiCE can evaluate. And the important thing here is they should be farmer level, measured in yield impact, measured on a per hectare basis, and not hypothetical. We've then given these guidance categories that you can choose from and some subcategories so that we've got some commonality as we analyze across the globe. And finally, we've got the top 10 prioritization needs in terms of production constraints and in terms of climate hazards. On the right-hand side, you'll be then asked what category and what subcategory the adaptation fits, a short name for it which will repeat throughout the rest of the evaluation, and a definition so that there's some validity if we want to go back and test our assumptions. At this point, we would suggest that once you've filled module A-, this is where you want to break your file into the different groups. So have a collective discussion up until A-, before you then set people into their groups to evaluate. And so then to do that, we want to register people into the PAiCE system with their name, organization type, speciality, and email. We also need to give them a name. In this case, this is the combined summary. We also have ethical consent at the top here, which is important to ensure that participants know that they are not obliged to stay, and if they have any concerns, they can find the contact details here. Across the top, we also have some other videos that you can watch in order to understand what PAiCE is. The first input of the evaluation is then with the AC. Now AC, the C stands for context. So what we're asking here is the characteristics of the different adaptations that are selected in terms of implications for farmers and the community context. If you've used PAiCE before, most of those questions are the same as previous. In module AI, I stands for implications, and here's where we're asking about the implications of different adaptations in terms of co-benefits, sustainability and climate change mitigation, in terms of inclusivity, in terms of women and girls, and in terms of the nominated population, nominated marginalized population. So if you remember right back in module F, you were asked for a marginalized population. This is where we ask how it will impact them. And finally, back in module F, you were asked about the top 3 environmental concerns. So in implications, for each of the different adaptations, it asks us how it relates to those key environmental concerns. We then move on to module AS, where S is for support requirements. Here, what we want to know is how sure are we in terms of the research context and scaling, in terms of the government context and for their support, and the private sector context. So are markets there to support, or are they emerging? After that, if you're interested in the results, you can click on this AC module where you'll see what you inputted, the values that are applied, and the different values that then come out in terms of the scores. In module AR, R stands for relationships. All we are then doing is saying for the given adaptation, how does it relate to the top 10 production constraints and climate hazards? So this is a simple yes or no. We then move on to module AP, where P is for production constraints. So what we have is the adaptation and the production constraint. And what it asks us is, across 5 different years, how does it perform in terms of yield and change in cost? We're also getting a level of certainty that is involved in the data that we've put in. We then do the same thing for overcoming climate hazards, where we have our adaptations and climate hazards, and then its performance and change in cost and level of certainty. Finally, in terms of input, we have module AU, where U stands for uncertainties. And this is where, as a group, we can put in what are the key remaining research questions and any other notes that we want to have noted within the tool. And this is really important when we think about not just setting a scaling agenda, but a research agenda. So we hope that you as a group will be able to really think about, if you had to direct research into these adaptations, what are the key things that we still need to understand? You'll see 2 options here. You can either say, in this case, 4 adaptations have been evaluated, click here to add another, and that will take you back to the start where you would add a new adaptation option. Otherwise, if you've filled and analyzed the number of adaptations that your group would like to, you can click to the outputs. So what we see here on the left-hand side is our filtering. So what we can do is we can filter out different adaptations, the climate or the production constraints, the crops, and if something does not meet a particular contextual issue. So for instance, we could say that we are not interested in wheat as a crop. So we would go here, we would click exclude, and what will happen, as you can see, wheat is then removed from this result. Likewise, we could say that we don't believe that agronomy can solve for flash flooding, so we can click exclude, and what that will do is we'll update. In this case, nothing actually made the list in this example data. So as you can see, this is really useful for discussions, particularly at an organizational level. So each person can take away a copy of these results and start to filter for what they would like as well. You can also set the currency and units, and most importantly, the weighting down here. So we can also see that down here that there are some options removed if there was negative yield or economic return, and anything that was contextually removed by the filter. In our results, what we get is our adaptations, addressing, and the crop. We get a full comparative score. So in this case, the first option is this release of BX 450 to address low yield potential cultivars of rice and kharif. We also get the yield benefit in terms of tonnage, the annual benefit assuming full adoption in terms of economics, and our contextual scores where it can show us the number of concerns that are raised. So in this case, low evidence base for BX 450. So what we would then see is if if we go back to here, we can see that BX450 is yet to be evaluated. So that's why it's flagging it in the results. So we can then start to filter out, in the case of a low evidence base, here, if we exclude anything that has a poor evidence base, what you'll see then is that everything that had that concern is now filtered out, and we can see that it's nominated, removed via filter, evidence base. The final element that we can then look at is the final report, which is again set up with print margins. If you go Control P, and you will get all of this information that's printed out in one document, where it will tell you the details of the workshop, a summary of who has attended, the system, the key constraints, the certainties on the data that have been inputted, the adaptation options, the weightings, the filters, and a profile for the top 3 collective adaptation options of what was there. So in Module A, we've started with a long list, we've selected what we want to evaluate, and we've come through to the end where we can get a printout that says, in this particular production domain, we've identified the top 3, and here are the elements that we would like to move forward with.